So if we could put this glass box around our lives instead of talking about what's really happening, it's a problem. You know, we sit there and say, can we influence academia? The Ontario Consortium of University Libraries that's building a massive scholars workstation interface on top of everything and doing the usability testing with a 150-person team. That's dreaming big. That's Mike Ridley, who always dreams big. Or when Mike and I partnered to create Knowledge Ontario to build a massive thing. Or when Ernie Ingalls and the team created the Alberta Library. We can do things on a massive scale. When the Canadian Library Association said, we're going to influence the broadband initiative. And so Wendy Newman went in as a librarian and made sure $500 million dropped down to broadband in all the places where rural, far north, and Indian Reserve libraries work. Like, that's the kind of stuff we do. Or copyright. You know, when Mr. Harper tried to pass the most appalling piece of legislation to bring DMCA to Canada on Christmas Eve, you know, it took Michael Geist and the CLA to publicize it, and he had 40,000 18 to 30-year-olds in there causing Mr. Harper to soil his underselves. Because he's going, no, you don't assemble people like that. And of course, this was before the Obama revolution came in and showed how you could use Web 2.0 social networking to fundamentally change the way it works, right? You know how the whole thing happened when we're following the Obama stuff in the States, and I've been tracking it on my blog, all the reports on how he used technology, how his team used technology, mostly David Clough. And so I started signing on to all of the Twitter accounts, the Facebook accounts for both Obama and McCain, and you could see Obama winning the war and how it works. And of course, Hillary's just as good at it. But the teams came together, and part of the deal was to get through all 50 states. That's why Hillary stayed in the election, even though she knew she was losing about 10 states earlier. But it built the infrastructure in every state for social network at every state level. And as we move it through, can libraries use that stuff to engage our communities? Like, you know, is an academic library that's not on, I stood at the front door of Robarts Library at UT, which is their version of McLennan Library, asked everybody coming in and out for 2 hours if they had a Facebook account. 100% of them had a Facebook account. All TAs, all professors, all students. And then I went and asked the staff on the reference desk, 30% of them had a Facebook account. How quickly were those librarians marching towards irrelevance? Like, oh, I don't want to, I lose my privacy. I'm going, but okay, you've been in it and you know how to manage the privacy settings. No. Okay, so it's just another uninformed opinion. I'm sorry, you're an information professional. The root word of information is informing. And if you don't have information and you don't have the experience, you are uninformed by definition. So you need to get into it and understand it, or you're clueless. And I don't want any clueless colleagues. So part of the deal was we've been managing this project to ask Obama for $100 million in stimulus to libraries. And you might have noticed that every single speech, every single YouTube video he's given since he entered office mentions libraries. So we're having some impact, and the libraries are in the stimulus package, and they're going to be in phase 2 as well. So look at what we did at Thompson. Can we make a difference? Well, there was a riot in Quebec City. I think Danielle was there. Yeah. And the law librarians love this because it was a major riot. And like, you know, librarians getting upset and throwing things is just unusual. Usually they just do anonymous blog postings and be bitchy, but you know, I'm an annoyed librarian because I don't really feel like I signed my work.
20 years ago this year.
It was a 20th anniversary. You should do it. You should have a party. And so I was hired, or the Stricker was hired, Ann Foster, a bunch of librarians were hired with a bunch of smart lawyers. And a lot of those librarians have law degrees. And so we were hired, I was chief change agent, and we trained people how to do this stuff, but we were to merge 300 companies into one in 3 years. And we were to convert all law in 3 years. And our goal was to change the way legal practice happens worldwide, period. And we were successful. We got the head of the Supreme Court of New York to launch our first product. In those days, this was before Windows, before CD-ROM, all that stuff. I had to go to the board of Thomson and say, we're going to do Windows, and we're going to do CD-ROM because I'm an ethnographer. My undergrad is in ethnographic observational training. So when I walk into every law library, all those big honking tables they have. Why do they do that? Because in the old days, when you did hypertext and had Windows open, you spread out the books on a table, and you'd have a Canadian abridgment volume, you'd have Canadian Encyclopedic Digest, you had all these case law digests. And I looked at it and said, gee, I've heard this Windows, that looks like Windows. And of course, CCH, our competitor, was saying, all our customers are telling us we need to do it in DOS and have one book per 3.5-inch disk. And that's what all our research was saying too. I went to the board and said, we're not going to do that. What they need is all the areas of law, all the books they need to practice properly in an area of law on a single CD. This was before there was decent online, there wasn't a web. I left Thompson when the head of Thompson said the web is a fad. So a lot of this stuff, we were able to redesign the whole law economy, and it was librarians doing it. It was librarians in partnership with real professionals, not real professionals, but lawyers who are real legal professionals who were actually practicing. So we made the link to the behaviors that needed to be there. And a number of librarians were bridges. They had the law degree, the JD or whatever. ProQuest Evo. Google gets all this stuff for saying, gee, we're going to convert all the world's literature, put all the books online. Well, ProQuest did it, put every single book that's ever been written in English from 1500 to 1799 online already. Is anybody here named Vince? My test for whether a library is doing a good job is I go in and talk to the master's students who aren't, the master's to PhD students who aren't, and say, what's the name of your librarian? And so my son's doing his master's at Concordia down the street. And so I said to him last night over dinner, what's the name of your librarian? He said, Vince. He knew Vince's last name because he's awesome. He's Web 2.0 guy. Who'd like him? And so my son, phoned me once and said, Dad, I found this really great database. You got to see it. It's just like that ProQuest digital book you're going. It's called Evo. I'm going, Zach, I helped build Evo. And here he's excited because he got Lion. And they're going, okay, there is a librarian who has someone saying, don't use Google. He's trained my son on how, he says, I learned how to use RefWorks from him. I learned how to use Lion and Evo. I use a little bit of ProQuest Digital Vault because I can find stuff in it. He knows he's been coming to the McGill archives, and the McGill archives here, he found his thesis is on a former department head who won the Governor General's Award for Literature. And he found a bunch of stuff that's never been discovered before in the archives. So that's what research is supposed to be. But the main thing is they call out to Vince saying, this is awesome that you've got a master's student who knows your name. And to me, that's my marker of whether you're having an impact or not. Are you an anonymous professional who sits there and says, I'm only going to wear a name badge that says librarian, and I'm not going to actually have my real name on my email account or on my IM account. We're going to have library@mcgill.ca or something stupid. Because after all, we're all generic librarians, right? We don't need to be acting like other professionals because when I want a doctor, I want to be anonymous. When I go to my cardiac surgeon, when I go to my lawyer to do my taxes, they better be anonymous. I want an anonymous account because that's what professionals are. Like, why is it so many people in our profession say, well, no, we're all good enough, we're all general, instead of saying there are people who are better at science research or legal research. There are people who are better at helping PhDs figure out their dissertation. That's why there's a team. That's why there's more of us than one in the library. And if we won't wear name badges, if we won't go out there and saying we're professionals and this is what professionals do, then how do we get out there and say, how do I get my Facebook account to connect with students or important groups? So Randy Reichart, who's the first librarian I knew at the Science Library in University of Alberta and the Nanotechnology Research Center for Cross Point there for CISTI, he has every single nanotechnology research scientist worldwide attached to him on his Facebook account. Goes up, sets his presence and says, I got my latte, I'm drinking it this morning. And you go in there and you follow it, and there's Randy. People say, oh, Randy, how are you doing? And this is that social grooming behavior. When I did my primatology course, why do baboons pick each other's fleas off? That's social grooming. It's the exact same thing we're doing when we're changing our status on Twitter or Facebook. It's social grooming. It keeps people aware of you. And then he says, oh, Randy, great. I need to know how to do a dissertation. I need to read this dissertation. What do I do? And Randy says, oh, that's easy. You go on to here, and since you're already on the Facebook account, you're already permissioned into ProQuest dissertations and theses. This is how you do it. If it's a University of Alberta dissertation, you'll find it in our catalog online in full text. And that kind of relationship fundamentally changes the dynamic of how we relate to people for research, community, learning. Anyway, what I like is Gale did the other thing. Gale and ProQuest are arch enemies, and they partnered because Gale converted everything from 1800 to 1899 English. And they just put a new joint agreement out, and now they're jointly developing a project that I had started to develop, now it's moved over there, called Summon. And that was the hottest thing at ALA Midwinter, was this new Summon interface, which is incredible.